In a peaceful suburb of Brookdale, a retired couple, Clara and Mark Bennett, were enjoying their quiet routine. But on one otherwise uneventful day, their calm life was completely interrupted by an unexpected discovery. They saw tiny, shaky kittens playing on their patio chairs, tumbling over cushions and chasing each other as if the yard belonged to them. But these were not ordinary house pets, they were wild bobcats. Watching from a distance was their highly protective mother, whose focused stare made it clear that she now claimed this space. Claire and Mark were stunned to discover that a wild bobcat family had turned their backyard into a home. Yet this surprise was only the start. What happened next would cause them to rethink everything they understood about the boundary between the natural world and their own. Before we continue, please press the like button, subscribe if you are new here, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. The morning sun stretched across the neatly trimmed yard in Brookdale as Clara Bennett walked to the kitchen window with her first cup of coffee. At 72, she had settled into a steady, comfortable routine with her husband Mark, who was already outside checking on his tomato plants. Their small ranch-style home had been their peaceful space for the past 15 years, ever since they downsized from the house where they had raised their 3 children. Mark. Clara's voice carried a tone of urgency that made him pause and look up from the garden. Come see this. Mark Bennett, a retired mail carrier with hands permanently marked by Brookdale's red clay soil, walked over to the patio doors where Clara stood, frozen in place. There, bouncing across the outdoor furniture like playful acrobats, were 2 spotted kittens unlike any cats they had seen before. Are those? Mark's voice trailed off as he adjusted his glasses. I think they are bobcats, Clara whispered, resting her hand on Mark's arm. Baby bobcats. The kittens, no larger than their terriers, Max and Ruby, now barking loudly from inside, had tufted ears and spotted coats that shimmered in the morning light. They rolled and wrestled across the patio cushions, completely unaware of the humans watching them. Mark reached for the door, but Clara quickly held him back. Wait, she said. Where is their mother? As if answering her question, a shape shifted near the far edge of the yard. Under the large oak tree they had planted when they moved in, sat a fully grown bobcat. Her amber eyes locked onto the house with an intensity that made both Clara and Mark step back from the window. My goodness, Mark said softly. She is beautiful. The mother bobcat truly was stunning. Her fur was a rich mix of brown and gray, covered in the clear spots and stripes unique to her species. She sat still, calmly observing her kittens while never losing sight of the house. Her presence was both peaceful and serious. We should call someone, Clara said, already reaching for her phone. Maybe animal control. But what they would soon find out was that these uninvited guests were going to change everything they believed about coexisting with wild animals. The first call went to the Brookdale Police Department. A young dispatcher named Alina answered and listened carefully as Clara explained what was happening. Ma'am, I understand why you are concerned, Alina said. But unless the animals are behaving aggressively or seem unwell, we are not allowed to interfere. Bobcats are part of the local wildlife. You could try contacting Parks and Wildlife Services. The Brookdale Wildlife and Land Services gave a similar response, though Ranger Tom Whitaker offered more background. What you are seeing is actually not that rare anymore, Tom said during the phone call. With all the new construction around North Brookdale, wildlife is adjusting to city life. He explained that the mother likely found their yard during the recent heavy rainfall. She had probably been looking for a sheltered, dry area to give birth to her kittens. But we have dogs, Mark added, having joined Clara on speaker. Small dogs. I get your concern, Mr. Bennett, Tom replied. Keep your dogs indoors or supervised outside. Bobcats tend to avoid trouble with people and pets, but a mother with kittens can act unpredictably. Over the next few days, the Bennets found themselves sharing space with their unexpected guests. They kept Max and Ruby inside, much to the dog's annoyance, and observed the Bobcat family from the windows, almost like their own personal wildlife series. But then came a surprise. Clara was watching the kittens play when she noticed movement near the garden shed. Another Bobcat kitten appeared. Then another. And another. "Mark," she called out. "There are more." By the time Mark joined her, 5 Bobcat kittens were visible in their backyard. 5 spotted little bodies tumbling, pouncing, and chasing butterflies with clumsy effort. 5, Mark said, shaking his head. She had 5 babies back here. The mother Bobcat seemed aware of their reaction. She stretched out beneath the old oak tree, then calmly walked a little closer to the house. The Bennets stayed completely still as she moved to within 20 feet of the patio door. She paused, looked right at them with a steady, unreadable gaze, and then returned her focus to the kittens. "I think she is showing them off," Clara whispered, a hesitant smile forming on her face, even with her worries still present. As time went on, the Bennets found themselves slowly shifting their lives to accommodate the Bobcat family. Mark began doing his morning gardening in the front yard. Clara placed a chair near the back window where she could knit and watch the kittens play. They even started a small journal to keep track of the kittens' growth and behavior. "The one with the extra spot on her ear caught a grasshopper today," Clara wrote one evening. "The smallest one, we are calling her Pebble, tried to climb the bird feeder pole. She slipped down 3 times and finally gave up." But not everything was easy. As the kittens grew more confident and their instincts sharpened, the backyard started to change. Small prey, mice, a vole, even a young rabbit, began to appear on the patio. Partly eaten, and certainly not pleasant. "This is getting out of control," Mark said one morning, holding his nose while looking at the latest mess left behind. "We cannot even sit out here anymore." Clara nodded in agreement, though she still felt a sense of sympathy as she watched little Pebble trying to drag a mouse nearly her own size across the yard. "They are learning," she said quietly. "That is what she is teaching them." The real surprise came 2 weeks after the family was first discovered. Mark had not been in the backyard for several days, but he needed to check the water meter by the fence. He walked slowly, making sounds to let the animals know he was there. The mother Bobcat was in her usual spot, watching, but she stayed still. Just as Mark reached the meter, he heard it, a low, deep growl that made the hairs on his arms rise. He stopped, then turned his head slowly. Less than 10 feet away, partly hidden behind the garden shed, was another adult Bobcat. This one looked larger, more muscular, and had a scarred ear. "Clara," Mark called, keeping his tone calm and steady, "call Tom Whitaker. Right now." Mark stepped back slowly, keeping his eyes on the unfamiliar Bobcat. The animal returned his stare with the same alert focus as the mother. By the time he got back inside, his hands were trembling. Tom Whitaker arrived about an hour later, carrying a small notebook and binoculars. From the Bennets' living room, he observed the yard carefully, jotting down notes between quiet glances. "That is most likely the father," Tom explained. "Male Bobcats usually leave after mating, but when food is easy to find in neighborhoods, they can behave differently. He has probably been coming around at night. This may be the first time you have seen him in daylight." "Is it safe?" Claire asked, holding Mark's hand. "It feels like we are stuck inside." Tom paused to consider his words. Bobcats are usually shy around people. The fact that they are staying nearby means they do not see you as a danger, which is actually a positive sign. "But I understand why you feel uneasy." He then went over their options. "Relocating them is possible," he said, "but it carries risks. Bobcats are very territorial. When they are moved, they often run into others, and that leads to conflict. Many do not survive the move, especially mothers with Bobcat kittens." The stress of being caught and moved can also be serious. So what should we do? Mark asked. Try to get them to leave on their own, Tom replied. Make the yard less inviting. Remove anything that draws in prey animals. That includes bird feeders. Use motion-activated sprinklers or lights. Playing talk radio outside can help. The sound of human voices often keeps wildlife away. You can also try placing strong scents like ammonia or special deterrent sprays around the edges of the yard. Claire and Mark looked at each other. The idea of pushing away a family they had come to care about was more difficult than they had expected. How long until the kittens are old enough to be on their own? Claire asked. Usually around 9 to 12 months, Tom answered. Though in cities, where food is easier to find, they might move on earlier, sometimes in 6 to 8 months. After Tom left, the Bennetts sat quietly in their living room, watching the Bobcat family from behind the window. The kittens chased each other around the oak tree. Their mother was grooming nearby, relaxed in the last light of the day. The male Bobcat had disappeared again, most likely returning to his usual nighttime visits. 6 to 8 months, Mark repeated. That is a long time to feel like we are locked in our own house. Clara was quiet. Then she said, Remember when the kids were little? And how the house felt so strange when they left for college? Mark turned to look at her. He understood what she meant. You want them to stay. I want us to figure out how to live with them, Clara replied. Out of all the yards in Brookdale, that mother chose ours. She chose this place to raise her Bobcat kittens. That has to mean something. Over the following days, the Bennetts found a balance. They installed motion sensor lights at the far corners of the yard, spots they hardly used. They moved the bird feeders to the front lawn and secured the garbage bins. But they left the main part of the backyard, near the oak tree and garden shed, just as it was. They also changed their daily habits. Morning coffee was now taken beside the back window, where they had a perfect view of the kittens' morning routines. They learned that the Bobcats were most active at dawn and dusk. This allowed the Bennetts to use the patio safely in the middle of the day. Max and Ruby adjusted too, learning to go outside only under supervision, using the side yard instead. Clara's journal about the kittens became more detailed. She was now able to tell them apart not just by their spots, but by their behavior. There was Brave One, always the first to check out new things. Climber, determined to reach the top of every tree. Pouncer, enthusiastic but often clumsy during her play hunting. Watcher, who liked to observe more than participate. And Pebble, the smallest, but endlessly persistent. Mark, who had started out more worried, found himself getting involved. He placed a trail camera near the oak tree to record the family's activities at night. The footage revealed a whole world they had never seen. The mother teaching the Bobcat kittens how to hunt. The father stopping by and leaving food. The cubs wrestling under the stars. Come look at this. She is teaching them how to stalk, Mark would say, showing Clara a video on his tablet. Watch how she crouches low and moves slow. As spring gave way to summer, the Bennetts observed the Bobcat kittens change before their eyes. Once clumsy and unsure, now lean and more precise in movement. Their markings began to fade, their steps became smoother, and their playful energy took on a more focused tone. The turning point in their relationship with the Bobcats came from an unexpected place. Mark had been struggling with rats in the garden shed for months. He had tried traps, repellents, even sealing holes, with no lasting success. Then one morning he noticed the shed door was slightly open. He must have forgotten to latch it. Expecting damage, he opened it carefully. But inside, there was no mess, no signs of chewing or droppings, and no rats. They are pulling their weight, he told Clara with a grin. The real test came in late July, when a strong storm hit Brookdale with heavy rain and high winds. From inside, The Bennets watched as the mother bobcat guided her kittens under the garden shed, likely the same spot she used when they were first born. But Pebble was not among them. Clara saw her first, a soaked little figure crouched near the fence, clearly too scared or too small to cross the water-filled yard. "We need to help her," Clara said, already reaching for the door. "Clara, wait," Mark said, gently stopping her. But the mother bobcat was already moving. She bounded across the flooded grass in a few strong leaps, reaching Pebble quickly. Yet instead of picking her up, she nudged the kitten forward, urging her to follow. Pebble tried. She took a few steps but stumbled. The water was too deep for her little legs. Then something unusual happened. The mother turned and looked directly at the house, at the Bennets watching from the door. It was a look that seemed to ask for help, without words. Without thinking, Mark grabbed an umbrella and stepped into the rain. Water soaked his clothes instantly, but he moved slowly and calmly toward the fence. The mother did not back away. Instead, she stepped aside, allowing him to get close. He laid the umbrella down over the deepest patch of water, making a narrow bridge. It was not much, but it helped. With her mother urging her forward, Pebble used the umbrella to cross. Once she reached the higher ground, her mother lifted her by the scruff and carried her back to safety. Mark returned inside, his pulse racing. Clara wrapped him in a towel, her expression full of awe. "She trusted you," she said softly. "She really trusted you." From that point on, something changed. The mother bobcat stopped hiding whenever the Bennets stepped outside during the day. The bobcat kittens still kept their distance, but sometimes they would play near the patio, even while the couple sat nearby. As summer drew to a close, the signs of change grew clearer. The father bobcat was seen less often. The kittens began bringing in their own prey, hunting on their own. Bold One was the first to explore beyond the property, sometimes disappearing for most of the day before returning. In early September, Tom Whitaker returned for a check-in. He was impressed by what he found. "This is incredible," he said, taking a photo of Clara knitting quietly while two bobcats rested beneath the oak tree. "You have managed something rare, real coexistence." "They will leave soon, won't they?" Clara asked, unable to hide the emotion in her voice. "Most likely," Tom said. "But that is what you want. You gave them a safe space to grow and learn. They are healthy, confident, and skilled. You should feel proud." The departures began in late September. Bold One was the first. One day he left and never returned. A week later, Climber followed. By October, only Pebble and Watcher remained with their mother. The final morning arrived in early November. Clara sensed something different as soon as she looked outside. The mother bobcat was sitting in the center of the yard, her two remaining kittens beside her. They were not hunting or playing. They were simply sitting still, facing the house. "Mark," Clara said gently, "I think they are saying goodbye." The couple stood quietly behind the glass door, watching as the bobcat family held still for several long moments. Then, as if they heard a signal only they could understand, they rose together and walked calmly toward the back fence. At the fence line, the mother bobcat paused. She looked back one last time. Her eyes met Clara's through the window. For a brief second, their gaze held. Then the mother slipped through the fence and was gone. The backyard felt quiet in the days after they left. Mark took down the trail camera. Clara closed the notebook, now filled with half a year's worth of notes. Max and Ruby reclaimed the yard, though they still approached the oak tree with a bit of caution. 2 weeks after the bobcats had gone, the Bennets were sitting with their morning coffee when Mark noticed something on the patio. A single gray feather, probably from a dove, placed neatly on the doormat. "Could be the wind," Mark said, though his voice did not sound certain. More feathers appeared over the next few days. Always on the doormat. Always placed with care. Then one evening as they watched the sunset from the patio, Clara gently touched Mark's arm. There, by the fence, sat a young bobcat. The extra spot on the left ear was easy to recognize. "Pebble," Clara said softly. The young bobcat stayed there for a few seconds, just long enough for them to see how much she had grown, how strong and healthy she looked. Then she turned and disappeared into the dimming light. "She made it," Mark said, his voice thick with feeling. "Our little Pebble made it." The visits began to happen more often. Not just Pebble, but sometimes Watcher too. The bobcats never stayed long, and they always kept a respectful distance, but they made their presence known, quiet nods to the couple who had once shared their space. When Tom Whitaker heard about these return visits, he was amazed. "That is not usual behavior for bobcats," he said. "The kind of trust you built, it is rare." As winter settled into Brookdale, the Bennetts returned to full use of their yard. But they left the ground under the oak tree as it was, untouched just in case. Now and then in the morning dew, they would spot faint tracks. Signs that their wild visitors still came by at night. "You know," Mark said one evening as they sat outside with Max and Ruby at their feet, "I used to think this yard belonged to us. But maybe it does not work that way." Clara smiled and took his hand. "Maybe we are just all living here, trying to share the same space," she said. "Even here in the suburbs," Mark agreed. As if in response, a familiar shape appeared briefly along the fence line. Just for a second, just long enough to remind them that nature was never as far away as it seemed. And sometimes, if you were patient and kind, it might trust you enough to let you witness a part of its world. Clara and Mark had been chosen by one bobcat mother to witness something rare, a wild family raising its young. They had met the moment with care, learning to share their space in a way that respected both people and wildlife. And in return, they had been given something lasting, a bond with the natural world that reached beyond fences or lawns. In the quiet town of Brookdale, where neat backyards brushed against old instincts, that bond continued to grow, one gently placed feather at a time.